Zariah sat in the old wooden chair outside her clay house. Her hands rested on her lap, still and folded. She watched the other children run through the dusty village square. Their feet kicked up sand and laughter. She wanted to smile, but her legs stayed silent like always. They had not moved for 10 years when she was 7. The bomb fell from the sky. It shook the earth and her body. The pain was like fire in her spine. When she woke up in the ruins, her legs were gone, not missing, but lifeless. Since that day, she had never stood again. People in the village whispered about her. She's useless now, they said when they thought she couldn't hear. Her mother died in the blast, and now she's just a mouth to feed. But Zariah heard every word, and each one became a new scar inside her heart. Still, she didn't cry anymore. Tears were a waste when no one came to wipe them. One afternoon, a strange sound filled the sky. It was not thunder, not a storm. It was metal, sharp and alive. A ship landed near the village edge, its legs heavy, its engines still hissing. People hid, scared. It was another raider, another tax collector, another war, but it was none of those. The hatch opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, not bulky, with silver tools on his belt and a kind look in his eyes. His clothes were dark blue, marked with Earth's emblem, a human, rare in these parts of the galaxy. He raised one hand and said, "I mean no harm." No one believed him at first, not even Zariah, but he didn't bring weapons, only crates of equipment. He spoke calmly to the elders, offered help with machines and power cells. He fixed broken things, water pipes, lights, old medbots, and then he built a tent alone, far from the main houses. No one knew what he was doing inside it. But Zariah watched from her chair every single day. One morning, while she sat outside as usual, the human passed by. He stopped and looked at her, but not with pity, not like the others. His eyes studied her legs, then her face. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice soft. She looked away and whispered, "Zariah." "I'm Callan," he said, kneeling down so his eyes were level with hers. "Can I show you something tomorrow?" She blinked, unsure, but nodded. No one had ever asked her to see something. No one had included her in anything for years. The next day, he came again and pushed her chair through the dust. They moved slowly to the tent he had built. Inside, it was full of lights and strange tools. Machines hummed, screens glowed, and something metal lay under a white sheet. Zariah stared at it, not sure what to think. Callan pulled the sheet back, revealing 2 long metallic legs. They were thin, elegant, shaped like a dancer's limbs, but full of wires and smooth joints. "These are for you," he said simply. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. You can't be serious," she whispered. "I am," he replied. "I've been working on them since I landed." "But why?" she asked, her voice cracking after so long. He smiled, gently. "Because everyone deserves a chance to stand." She looked down at her useless legs, and for the first time in years, a tiny spark returned, hope, small and shaking, like a flame in the cold. Callan explained how the limbs worked. They connected to the nervous system through a bio-neural link. It was advanced tech, part human, part alien, part miracle. But there was a risk, always a risk. Pain during connection, rejection by her body, system overload. Still, she didn't hesitate. "Will I be able to walk?" she asked, gripping the armrests of her chair. "If all goes well, you'll do much more than that," he said. "You might run, dance, even jump." Zariah felt her heart beat faster, a feeling she hadn't known in years. But outside, shadows were growing. Not everyone liked what the human was doing. Some feared him, others envied him, and a few wanted to destroy what he had built. In the coming days, Zariah would have to face more than just her broken body. She would face danger and choices that could change her life forever. But tonight, as she was wheeled back home, she looked up at the stars, and for the first time in 10 years, she whispered to the sky, "I want to stand." The next morning, the sun rose behind dusty hills. The sky looked calm. But Ziraya's heart was storming inside. She had barely slept, her mind racing with the image of those robotic legs. Her fingers still trembled from the words he had said. "You deserve to stand." No one had said anything like that to her, not in 10 long years. She sat outside again, same old chair, same cold wind. But something was different. Callan came walking down the path. But this time he wasn't alone. A small floating bot hovered beside him, spinning quietly. "Morning, Ziraya," he said with a warm smile. "I brought my assistant. Her name is Keela." The bot beeped softly and did a tiny spin in the air. Ziraya blinked in surprise. "She's cute," Callan laughed. "She's also smarter than me." People watched from their homes, whispering again. Some frowned. Others pulled their children away. They didn't trust the human. And they definitely didn't like the attention Ziraya was getting. She noticed it too. But she didn't care, not this time, because something inside her had already changed. Callan knelt in front of her again, opened a small case. Inside were thin silver bands, wires, and a glowing chip. "This is the neural patch," he said. "If you allow me, I'll connect it to the base of your spine today." Ziraya hesitated, her eyes wide. "Will it hurt?" He looked honest. "Yes, but not forever." She took a deep breath, then nodded slowly. "I'm ready." They returned to the tent, Keela floating behind them like a silent nurse. Callan laid her on a clean padded bed. Ziraya's eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling, her hands gripping the sides. She tried to act brave, but fear crawled up her spine like ice. "Close your eyes," Callan whispered. "And when you open them again, we'll be one step closer." A cold touch, a sharp sting, a flash of heat, then darkness. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. When Ziraya woke up, everything felt different. She gasped softly, looking around, then slowly down at her legs. They were still there, still hers, but something new pulsed just above her waist. A faint hum, a tingling sensation running through her spine. The chip had been activated. "You okay?" Callan asked gently. Sitting nearby, Ziraya nodded slowly, then whispered, "I feel ... awake," he smiled. "That's your nervous system reconnecting." He handed her a small metallic band and placed it on her temple. "This lets you sync with the leg units." Then he brought over the prosthetics, 2 long, beautiful robotic limbs. She reached out and touched one, her fingers tracing the smooth silver surface. It was warm from his hands, not cold like she expected. "These aren't just machines," he said. "They're a part of you now." But before they could attach them, voices were heard outside. Shouting, angry, growing louder. Callan tensed, looked at Keela. Surveillance mode. The bot zipped out of the tent, disappearing into the dust. "What's going on?" Ziraya asked, her heartbeat racing. Callan stood up, frowning. "Not everyone wants you to walk." Outside, a group of villagers had gathered with tools and sticks. "The human is making monsters," one man yelled. "She should not be changed. This is against nature," another shouted. Ziraya heard it all from inside, her chest tightening with pain. She looked at Callan, who stood tall and firm at the tent's entrance. "She's not a monster," he said. "She's more human than any of you." They threw a rock. It hit the tent, bouncing off the fabric. Keela returned and hovered between them, projecting a hologram of the village's past, a memory of the bomb, the smoke, the screams, Ziraya's tiny broken body in the rubble. The crowd went silent for a moment, faces changing. Then someone whispered, "Let her choose." Callan stepped back inside. Closing the flap, he turned to Ziraya, his face calm again. "Are you still sure?" She looked into his eyes and nodded. "Yes," she said. "More than ever." He smiled and gently lifted one of the legs, aligning it with her thigh. A soft hiss, a click, then another. The connection wasn't just mechanical, it was emotional. When both limbs were attached, the room fell into a deep silence. Ziraya felt energy flow through her body like never before. Her heart pounded, her fingers trembled, and then her toes moved. Not much, just a twitch, but it was real. She gasped, eyes wide with wonder. I felt that, she said, her voice shaking. Callan chuckled, eyes gleaming. Yes, Zariah, he whispered, you're waking up. But the path ahead was still long. She couldn't stand yet, not today. Her muscles were weak, her balance untrained. But she had something far more powerful than strength. She had will, she had support, and she had someone who didn't see a crippled girl. He saw a fighter. The night wind howled across the dry plain. Stars blinked in the black sky like silent watchers. Deep beneath the village, hidden behind a rock-covered tunnel, the lab came to life. No one knew it existed, except for Zariah, Callan, and a little floating bot named Keela. It was their secret. A place of rebirth built beneath the sand. Zariah had been carried here for recovery. Her body still adjusting to the new limbs. She couldn't walk yet, but something had changed. She could feel her feet again, even if they weren't flesh. That alone made her heart race with hope. Hope was dangerous, but it was also beautiful. The lab walls glowed with soft blue light. Holograms floated above machines, projecting muscle maps and neural pathways. Every beep, every hum, made her believe something magical was happening. Callan worked for hours tightening screws, uploading new motion protocols, adjusting nerve sync levels. He didn't sleep much anymore. Keela often reminded him to rest, but he waved her off. I'll rest when she walks, he said, voice low and steady. Zariah watched him from her reclined seat. He wasn't like the men in the stories, loud, proud, and cruel. He was quiet, tired, and kind. Sometimes he looked at her not as a patient, but like she was the mission itself. She didn't know how to explain it, but it warmed her chest like sunlight. One morning, Callan walked over with something new. A curved brace with sleek black padding and flexible bands. This is for training, he said. It'll keep your spine straight while the legs learn your rhythm. Will it hurt? She asked again. He gave the same answer every time. Only a little. She smiled at that pain was nothing new to her. He attached the brace around her waist, clicking it tight. Then he lowered her legs to the floor. She looked down at them, still afraid to hope too much. Are you ready? He asked softly. No, she whispered, but do it anyway. Callan reached over and tapped a soft button behind her knee. A hum filled the room. Her legs twitched just like before. But this time, the motion didn't stop. A subtle shift of balance. Her thighs moved. Her ankles flexed. Zariah gasped, grabbing the rails of her seat. She wasn't falling, she was rising. Slow, unsure, but rising. Her breathing grew sharp. Her body shook, but she stayed up. I'm standing, she whispered. Eyes filling with tears, Callan stepped back, hands open, no support, just watching. You're doing it. Zariah, he said, you're standing. For a few seconds, it felt like the whole world held its breath. Then her knees buckled, and she fell forward right into his arms. He caught her gently. No panic, just steady hands. You fell, he said with a smile. That means you stood. She laughed, for the first time in years. A real laugh, full of fire. I want to do it again, she said, already trying to reset her feet. Days passed like pages turning. Each morning she stood, each night. She walked a few shaky steps. Sometimes she fell, sometimes she cried. But each time she stood again, it got easier. Her body remembered what it meant to move, and her soul began to believe it deserved to. But as her strength grew, danger crept closer, unseen above. A drone scanned the land, red lights blinking, gathering heat signals. It didn't belong to Callan, or to any friendly government. It was a hunter sent by a syndicate who'd heard rumors of forbidden tech. It captured one image before vanishing into the clouds. An image of a girl with robotic legs, standing in a secret lab. The signal was sent to a distant ship, and the countdown began. That night, Zariah stood in the lab again, her arms out for balance. She was getting better, stronger, faster. Callan watched her, proud and silent, but deep down, he knew time was running out. He had seen the energy spike 2 hours ago. Someone knew they were here, Zariah, he said gently. If you had to run, could you? She looked at him, surprised. Run? Why? Because the galaxy hates miracles, he replied, eyes dark. And you, my girl, are becoming one. She didn't understand fully, but she nodded. I'll run if you tell me to. He smiled softly and then whispered, Then we have one more night to make you fly. Keela beeped and dimmed the lab lights. Outside, the sand shifted. And something moved in the distance, but inside the lab, a girl who couldn't stand now prepared to defy her fate. Asterisk, the morning was silent, too silent. Even the wind outside the lab had stopped. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something big to happen, and something was about to happen. Ziraya's legs were fully connected now. The pain had faded, and her fear had been replaced by something stronger purpose. She stood near the edge of the training platform. Metal beneath her feet, rails on each side. Callan stood a few steps away, arms crossed, his eyes focused and calm. Keela hovered above, scanning muscle tension and neural flow. The air smelled like oil, heat, and hope. Ziraya took a deep breath, her fingers trembling. She had stood before. She had fallen before, but she had never taken a step. That's what today was about, the first step. Callan spoke gently. Ziraya, don't think about walking. She looked at him, confused. Then what should I think about? Think about reaching me, he said, his hand open toward her. Just one step, one movement toward someone who believes in you. She looked at his hand, and then at her feet. Her legs didn't feel foreign anymore. They felt like hers. Like they'd been waiting for this moment too. She shifted her weight slowly. Carefully, one joint clicked, then another, the machine whispering with life. Her right foot lifted off the ground. Only slightly, her knee bent like it had a memory. And then, she moved it forward. It landed with a soft metallic tap, and her balance wobbled. She gasped but didn't fall. Her body shook, her mind screamed, but her soul sang. Callan's eyes widened, and he whispered, Yes. Ziraya took another breath and brought the second foot forward, this time stronger, more certain, step by step, inch by inch. She closed the space between them until finally, she reached him and fell into his arms, laughing, crying, alive, outside the lab. Sand shifted again, unnoticed. A small drone buried itself near the rock wall, its lens blinking red. It had seen everything, and now it sent a signal across the stars. A ping to a warship in orbit, silent, watching, and preparing to strike. But inside the lab, they knew none of that. Inside, a celebration was happening, quiet and pure. Ziraya sat on the edge of the platform, her face glowing with joy. I did it, she whispered. I really did it, Callan nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. You didn't just take a step, Ziraya, he said. You changed your future. Keela beeped softly and displayed a replay of her steps in slow motion. Ziraya watched in awe as her own body moved like it never had before. She smiled, then looked up at Callan. What happens next? He paused, then said, We teach you to walk properly, run, climb whatever you want. But before he could continue, a sharp alarm rang through the lab. Red lights blinked. Keela spun fast, projecting alerts. Unidentified signal detected, hostile tech inbound. She beeped in warning. Callan's smile faded. His face went serious. He ran to the main console and scanned the signal. His heart dropped. It's a hunter probe, he muttered. Ziraya stood quickly, wobbling but stable. What does that mean? It means someone out there knows what we're doing, he said. And they're coming. She looked at the door, then at him. Should we run? He looked at her, then at her legs. Not yet, he said slowly. If you run now, you'll fall again. We need more time. How much time? She asked, panic rising. Hours, maybe less, he replied. But I can do something. He rushed to the back of the lab and opened a steel box. Inside were power cores, armor plates, and a hidden case marked Emergency Protocol. He opened it and pulled out a pair of reinforced leg boosters, sleek, military-grade upgrades. These were never meant for someone like you. He said, but you're not just anyone anymore. Ziraya stared at them, then nodded. Let's do it, she said with quiet fire in her voice. Callan attached them, every click echoing like thunder in the quiet room. She stood again. This time taller, more stable. Her steps sounded heavier, more powerful. She wasn't just walking now, she was preparing for war. Outside, the sky darkened as a small shadow appeared in orbit. A gunship, silent and deadly, lowering toward the surface. But it didn't know what waited for it. It thought it would find a weak girl and a tired human. Instead, it would meet a girl who had taken her first step and was ready for more. The sky changed color just after noon. It went from soft blue to the kind of gray that made animals hide and children fall silent. Ziraya stood just outside the hidden lab entrance, her new legs quiet but ready. Callan stood beside her, staring at the sky with eyes that had seen too much war. Keela hovered above them, scanning for threats, her lights pulsing fast. It's coming, Callan said, his voice flat and steady. Ziraya didn't ask what it was, she already knew. The hunter ship had entered the atmosphere without warning. Silent engines, black hull, no flags, no mercy. It was a death machine. And it was here for her. Back in the village, dust clouds rolled in like ghosts. Children were pulled indoors, windows shut tight. No one dared ask questions, but whispers spread. They came for the human. Someone said, no. Another answered, they came for the girl who walks. Callan loaded what little gear he had. A short-range blaster, a magnetic shield, and one emergency beacon. Not enough to win a war, but maybe enough to survive long enough for hope to land. Ziraya looked at her legs, the metal smooth and glowing faintly blue. She bent her knees, tested her speed, adjusted her balance. She was ready not to run, but to fight. Are you sure about this? Callan asked, his hand hovering over the manual override. Ziraya nodded once, her jaw set like stone. You didn't build me just to hide, she said. He smiled, even in fear. No, I didn't. The ground shook as the hunter ship landed. Near the ridge, its massive door hissed open, and a squad of armored drones marched out. Silent, precise, weapons already charged. They weren't here to talk, they were here to collect. One of them scanned the village, locating Ziraya's neural signature in seconds. She stepped forward before Callan could stop her. The wind tossed her hair back as her metal feet dug into the sand. One drone raised its arm, a laser sight locked onto her chest. Callan shouted, Ziraya, no! But she didn't freeze, didn't flinch. She jumped. The boosters on her legs fired with a scream, launching her toward the enemy like a comet. She twisted mid-air, her foot crashing into the drone's side. The impact bent its armor and sent it flying. The others turned instantly, opening fire. Red beams cut through the air as Callan dropped behind a rock. Returning fire with shaky hands, Ziraya landed hard, rolled, and came up swinging a broken pipe she had picked up on instinct. She moved faster than she ever had, faster than she ever thought possible. One drone grabbed her from behind, metal arms squeezing. She screamed and arched her back, her legs firing in reverse. Slamming the bot into a wall, sparks flew, metal cracked. She broke free. Callan was surrounded by two drones, shielding his body with the portable field. The energy flickered under constant blasts. Ziraya ran toward him, each step pounding like thunder in the earth. She leaped over the closest drone and landed behind it, ripping out its power cell with bare hands. Callan looked up at her in shock. You're not just walking, he said. You're flying. But victory didn't come easy. One last drone charged a heavy cannon, aiming at her exposed back. Callan saw it and moved without thinking. He jumped between them, the blast hitting him square in the chest. He fell, hard, blood on his shirt, eyes barely open. Ziraya screamed, everything inside her going silent except for rage. She turned, sprinted, and launched herself at the last drone. She didn't care about pain, didn't care about protocol. She crushed it with both feet, again and again, until nothing moved. Beneath her, Then she fell to her knees beside Callan, grabbing his hand. His eyes opened slightly, his voice soft. Still. Proud of you. She held back tears, shaking. Don't you dare die. Keela beeped loudly, hovering over them, deploying healing foam and emergency patches. Callan's body stabilized, but his voice faded into sleep. He needed help, and fast. Zariah stood up slowly, her legs dented, her body bruised, but her spirit unbroken. She looked up at the hunter ship, its engines still warm, its crew waiting inside. They hadn't expected resistance. They hadn't expected her. She turned. Tequila, call for backup, she said. Now. The little bot beeped and launched a flare into the sky when the stars would see. As the sun began to rise, the village came out of hiding, and they saw Zariah standing strong, blood on her face, steel in her step. She was no longer just a girl in a chair. She was a symbol asterisk. The lab was quiet, too quiet. No humming machines. No metal clicks, no warm voice telling her, "You're doing great." Just the soft breathing of a man who had given her everything. Callan lay still on the cot, his chest rising slowly, bandages covering half his body. His blood stained the floor, and his tools were scattered across the table. Zariah sat beside him, holding his hand in hers, her fingers trembling, not from fear but from guilt. Outside, the village was beginning to understand. People who once called her useless now whispered her name with awe. The girl who couldn't stand had fought machines with nothing but courage and wires, but inside her heart, the victory felt hollow, because the one who made her legs walk might not survive to see her run. Keela hovered above, her blue lights dimmer than usual. Her voice came out softer, slower. His vitals are weak but stable, she said. He needs real medical care, not field repair. Zariah's voice cracked as she whispered, "Then we have to move him." But her legs shook under her body, damaged from the fight. Every step sent sparks through her nerves, tiny flashes of pain blinking behind her eyes. Still, she stood because he would have. She dragged herself to the console and tried to power the backup systems. Nothing happened, just a flicker and a cough of static. The lab was dying, just like him. And she couldn't fix it, not without him. She turned to Keela. "Is there a backup power source?" Keela scanned, then beeped once. "Yes, beneath the old mine shaft." "Dangerous?" Zariah asked, already knowing the answer. "Yes," Keela replied. "Unstable ground, fallen beams, possible radiation pockets." Zariah didn't hesitate. "Show me the way." She strapped on her damaged armor and limped out of the lab. The path to the shaft was broken and steep. Each step felt like walking on glass with bare skin. But her thoughts stayed on Callan, his tired smile, his steady hands, his quiet belief in her. That belief was the reason she was alive. Now it was her turn to believe in him. The mine was cold and filled with silence. Old cables hung like vines, and rusted machines leaned against cracked walls. Keela led the way, her small lights barely pushing back the dark. Zariah moved carefully, balancing her weight on bent knees. Then the floor gave out beneath her, and she fell. She landed hard, a scream escaping her lips. Metal twisted in her leg, sparks flew. Her nerves lit up with fire. She was trapped alone, in pain and nearly broken. But in the silence, she heard his voice in her memory. "Falling means you tried," he had said, "and trying means you're still fighting." With gritted teeth, she reached out and grabbed a beam. She pulled, pushed, crawled, screamed, and finally stood again. Her leg was cracked open, wires exposed, but it still worked. Half working was enough for her at the end of the mine. She found it an old fusion core, dusty, barely glowing, but intact. She disconnected it from the wall, lifted it onto her back. Its weight made her knees bend, her spine scream. But she walked one broken step at a time, because Callan would have done it for her without a second thought. When she returned to the lab, the air smelled different, colder, sharper, like time was slipping away. She slammed the core into the backup. Port and flip the switch. The lights snapped on, machines beeped. Life returned. And so did the heat in his body. Callan stirred, his eyes blinking weakly. She knelt beside him, covered in blood, dust, and broken metal. He smiled, barely able to speak. "You're glowing," he whispered. Zariah laughed through her tears. "Don't flatter me, you look like garbage." He coughed, wincing. "Good. Still got fire." They sat in silence, hearts beating slow and soft. Keela moved around them, patching wires, scanning wounds, resetting power. For now they were safe, but the battle wasn't over. Zariah knew more enemies would come, stronger. Ones, darker ones. But she was no longer afraid. Callan reached up and touched the side of her face. "I knew you were the one," he said. "I didn't fix you. You woke yourself." She leaned into his hand. "And you made me believe I could." Outside, the sun began to rise again. The village watched from afar. Quiet, respectful, unsure. But within the walls of that lab, a new legend was being written. Not about war, not about power, but about two broken souls who saved each other. One with wires, the other with love. The morning was golden, calm, and alive. The winds that once carried whispers of pity now carried songs of change. Children stood on rooftops, elders on porches. They all watched the girl step out of the lab, tall, steady, and shining with new strength. Her legs, once a symbol of loss, now shimmered like hope itself. And her name, Zariah, was no longer a quiet burden. It was a promise. Callan leaned against the lab's outer wall, pale but smiling, a bandage wrapped around his chest. Keela floating beside him like a nurse who never gave up. Zariah walked toward him, every step like thunder on the earth. But this time, it wasn't just her steps that mattered, it was what they meant. "You're moving like a storm," Callan said with a weak chuckle. Zariah smiled, standing tall. "I'm just getting started," he nodded, pride in his tired eyes. "You don't need me anymore." She shook her head slowly. "That's not true. But I'm no longer your reason to walk," he whispered. "That's the difference." By afternoon, villagers gathered in the square. They brought bread, water, even flowers, silent offerings of respect. The same people who once turned their faces away now watched her like she was made of light. One child ran up to her, barely 8, dragging a crutch. "Can you teach me?" The child asked, eyes wide, voice trembling. Zariah knelt, touched his shoulder and said, "Yes, I can." From that moment on, the old lab became something new. Not a place of hidden machines, but a clinic, a school, a sanctuary. Callan stayed, recovering slowly, guiding the next generation with soft words and sharp tools. And Zariah, she became a teacher, a protector, and to many, a legend. She trained children with missing limbs, adults with shattered bones, and always told them one thing before their first step. This is not about walking, it's about choosing to rise. But word of her didn't stop in the village. The drone footage had spread through black markets, then news circuits, then stars. Soon, people across systems knew her face. The girl who flew, they called her. The human who helped her was called the Silent Builder. Together, they were a symbol of what Earth and the stars could do together. Not apart. One day, months later, a sleek ship arrived, no weapons, no flags, just white steel and soft lights. A delegation stepped out, mixed species. Dressed in official robes, they bowed to her in front of everyone. "We've come to learn from you," they said, "to give others what you were once denied." Zariah stood on the platform they had built in the square. She looked at the villagers, at the children who now ran with metal legs and glowing arms. She looked at Callan, who stood with his cane, nodding with pride. And then she looked up, at the sky where her pain used to live. And she spoke for all of them. "I was broken for many years," she said, "not just in body but in soul. I thought my story ended the day I lost my legs. But it started the day someone believed in me. I walk now because of human hands, but I fly because of my own heart." The crowd clapped, some cried, some just stared with awe. Keela recorded everything, sending it across satellites. sharing it with stars. And across those stars, others began to rise. Others Ureas, other Calans. Other stories waiting to be written. That night, the wind came back, soft, peaceful, warm. Zariah stood alone on a hill, her legs glowing in the moonlight. Callan walked up beside her slowly, leaning on his cane. "You did it," he whispered. She smiled. "We did it." He looked at her with tired eyes and asked, "Do you still remember the first time you stood?" She nodded. "I remember everything." He grinned. "So ready for your final test?" She raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" He pointed to the cliff. "Jump." She stared at him, unsure if he was joking. Then he added softly, "Not because you need to, but because you can." She looked down at her feet, then at the stars. And without another word she ran. She ran faster than ever before, boosters igniting, sparks flying. And when she reached the edge, she didn't stop, she jumped. The night lit up behind her as she soared, not with wings, not with rockets, but with everything she had been given and everything she had become. And in that moment, the girl who once couldn't stand became the girl who could fly.